you ever wondered how to get those beautiful blurry backgrounds like you often see in pet photos? I'll tell you right now, it's usually not through editing. Today I'm going to talk to you about how you can get backgrounds like these through a careful choice of settings, the lens you use, and how you set up the photo. Let's get into it. Make sure you stick around to the end because I am going to share with you a little tip that I sometimes use in editing just to add a little bit of extra blur, but I usually don't add very much at all. Most of my background blur in my photos is made in camera on location. If you're enjoying this video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, show me the love because I really keep meaning to make more YouTube videos, but my ADHD brain has a really hard time with it. So give me the dopamine and I will be here more often with you guys with pet photography tips, editing stuff, behind the scenes, I don't know, whatever you guys want, because that's what it's about. We need that dopamine fix. Let's go and talk about getting blurry backgrounds. We're going to be basically covering 3 different aspects that really affect how blurry your background is. The first is aperture. The next one is the lens length that you choose and also the distance from you to your subject. These things are all really important. They're all really interconnected, and it's really important to understand how it all works in order to change or affect how wide your depth of field is. Basically, how much of your photo is in focus and how quickly that becomes blurry or not. So you need to think of focus less as like it's gonna focus on this dog over here and this dog back here, because it can't do that. It focuses in kind of a line. If you have a look at this photo, you'll see that there is a really clear line of focus before it gets blurry going forward and blurry going backward. That is the plane of focus or the depth of field, and that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today because that has a heap to do with how blurry the background is. So first thing I want to talk about is aperture. Aperture is a setting that you can change on your camera. If you're using manual mode or maybe aperture priority, you can also change it in an iPhone's portrait mode. There is a way to change the F number, which is the aperture. It's basically how wide the pupil of your lens is, and the wider it is, the narrower that depth of field is, and the blurrier your background is going to be. Now, my lens here goes to f1.8, which is nice and wide. It's going to let a lot of light in, and it's going to give me a really nice narrow depth of field, depending on how close or how far away I am from the dog. Some kit lenses might go to f4, 5.6, or 6.3, something like that. That means you're going to be getting less light in, and you're probably also going to have a wider depth of field and therefore more background in focus more often than a f1.8 lens. f2.8 is pretty good too. The smaller the number, the wider the aperture, the narrower that focus area is going to be. So have a look at your lens and get comfortable using manual. If you're not sure how I cover this in a lot of detail in my learning journey, I also have a whole little mini course dedicated to mastering your camera for pet photography. So I really recommend it because it means you can control how the photo looks, how it comes out, all that really good stuff. I want to show you some examples of how photos change as the aperture changes. So this first one here is taken with a 50mm lens, and this is at f1.8. You can see the castle is pretty blurry, the background's blurry, and we haven't got any foreground, but I'm quite far away from the dog, so we already have quite a wide depth of field. If you have a look, this bit of the ground is still pretty much in focus, and all the way to here is pretty much in focus as well. So it's already quite wide, and then it starts getting more and more blurry as it goes backwards. So this is taken at f1.8. Now we are at f4, and you can see already that we have the castle in the background a little bit less blurry. And I guess like some of the grass back here is a little bit less blurry. And if we go to the next one, which is f6.3, have a look at the castle now. Have a look at the grasses. Everything's looking way more in focus everywhere. And then this is at f10. So as the number gets bigger, that area that is in focus also gets bigger. Have a look at the mountain in the background compared to f1.8. Okay, so Obviously, bigger numbers are better for landscape because you can get more of the photo in focus. But if you want a blurry background, then a smaller number is going to do that for you. Let's have a look at another example when I was up closer to my dog. So here we start again at f1.8. Check out the background, super, super soft. All this bokeh, really pretty. Then we go to f4 and I moved a little bit there, but this is a bit more accurate. Have a look at the spots there. We've got a lot more texture here. You can kind of see there's some leaves, but obviously here the depth of field is way narrower because of how close I am to my dog, and that is the next point that we're going to talk about. And here we have f8, and have a look, especially have a look at the log here, the blur, where that is, probably blurry, starts getting blurry about there. And if we look at the f1.8, like all the way up to here almost. You can see it's a really sharp line from where it's blurry to where it's not blurry. So that is the first thing, is choosing a wide aperture or a small f number is going to be the first thing in getting these blurry backgrounds. The next thing is how close or far away you are from your subject. So let's have a look again at some examples. This is with this lens, my 135, favorite lens, love it. Look how close I am to Loki. Look at the background. It's just pure blurry green. Here I move a little bit further away. Still pretty blurry, still pretty narrow depth of field. I'm moving further away again. You can start seeing a few more details. Here I've got his whole body, and look at how the background's now starting to get more textured there. And have a look here at the background. Now I'm going to show you an example using a 50mm lens because that is something that you guys might be more likely to have as a starter lens. So have a look, we're up really close, look at the background. Getting further away, we can already start to see little small bits of light, different texture in the trees. Getting further away again, have a look at how the trees have changed and the light. And of course we can see more of the background because we're further away, but it's about that blur, and even here again further away, the softness and the blur and the depth of field. Like if you have a look here, this photo is in focus from about this point on Loki's face to about here, right? This is how much of this photo is in focus. When I move this far away, have a look, you can see it's starting to get not blurry here. And it probably goes a little way back. So you have to imagine that the depth of field is maybe this wide instead of this wide. Might not seem like a huge difference, but it definitely is. Add aperture into the mix and, we're starting to then get more and more in focus backgrounds. This is especially important if you have a kit lens that can't go down to a wide aperture. Playing with the distance from your subject is going to help you get those blurry backgrounds. You can even force iPhones to do this as well. The last thing to talk about is the focal length of the lens, because this also has a big impact on how blurry your background is going to look. Again, I've got receipts. I got the examples. This is with a 35mm lens, which is a little bit less wide than your typical iPhone. So you can see the background is pretty messy. We can see a heap of it. Take note of how close I am to Journey, and I think this would have been at 1.8. So the next one I had was an 85mm. Have a look at the background. It's definitely getting softer. Basically, this is compression. It's like you take the background and you pull it and you stretch it. So these little bokeh light spots are these ones here. Here they look really tiny, but as we start getting some lens compression, we're pulling that background, and then with the 135, we pulled it even more, and look how beautiful and soft this is. A longer lens length will give you more compression, which is going to give you that soft, blurry background look. So if you're shooting with a 105mm lens, a 135, a 200mm like zoom, those are going to give you the softest, blurriest backgrounds because they just pull that background towards you and they stretch out and they make that bokeh really pretty, and the spots and everything super, super pretty. So that is how lens length can affect the backgrounds as well. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to show you a trick that you can use in editing to add a little bit of a kind of a special magical blur effect to your photos. I would say be really careful and don't go overboard with this one because it's gonna look a little bit strange. For me, it works best if I have some bokeh, some light spots in the background, and I'm gonna kind of just make them melt a little bit. For this, you're gonna need Photoshop, and we're gonna wanna open the image up. This is one that I've already edited. So you can see it here. We've got these light spots in the background, and I just wanna make them melt a little bit with a little bit of magic. Okay, so I'm just gonna duplicate my layer here. I'm working with a smart object, so that can just stay as it is. I'm gonna come to filter, go to blur, and I'm gonna go motion blur. Now look, this is one method. The great thing about Photoshop is that there are always 10 different ways to do any job you want to do, any technique you want to do. There's probably 10 variations on how to get it. So this is one way that you can add a special kind of blur to some part of your background. It is not the only way. Don't come at me in the comments saying that's not how I blur it. This is one method, and this is what I use for this particular situation, okay? We could also lower clarity in Lightroom. We could use a Gaussian blur. There are a ton of methods to add some blur to the background if you need it. I personally don't use any of those. I only do this sometimes when I want to. So we're now going to add a layer mask to our image. And I'm going to invert it with Command and I, so this is black. I have a video in my channel on how to use Photoshop that goes over masking in more detail if you're not sure how to do it. With a white brush now, because we're going to be revealing what is hidden under that black, or with all the lights turned off, we're going to turn on some lights. If you've seen my other video, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to mask this in gently, particularly on the lower part of that bokeh and a little bit on the top. And I'm just going to give it this kind of melty effect. Now with the motion blur, I didn't show you what settings I used for very long because you can kind of choose whatever works best for you. There isn't one setting that I always use. Sometimes I have more blur, sometimes I have less blur. It depends on how wild I'm feeling, but I do make the blur go straight up and down because then it really just looks like the bokeh is melting. There we go, something like that. It's pretty subtle, I think. Turn it on and off again. You can see it just softens it, blurs it, adds a little bit of something, something, and then we can work on it from there. That is pretty much it. Those are the things you need to keep in mind when it comes to getting blurry backgrounds in your photos. Aperture, distance from you to your subject, and the lens length that you're using. If you need any more advice on this, I really do cover all of it in my Learning Journey membership. It's only open twice a year, so don't miss out. It has a ton of editing tutorials in it, lessons on everything if you want to learn how to take photos like me particularly, but also I get guest speakers in. I get people talking about all kinds of things. I've got a studio photographer coming in. I've got full editing tutorials from me and my coach Sabrina, like a ton of them. You get 2 new editing tutorials every month. So if you like editing tutorials, you'll love the Learning Journey. Lessons on light, behind the scenes, working with clients, pretty much everything, heaps more planned. So if you want to learn more about pet photography and you're serious about it and you're sick of scrolling through a lot of YouTube videos, not getting the advice that you want, I highly recommend it because you also have access to our community, which means you can ask me questions, Sabrina questions, and our community questions, and we can help you get where you want to go. Thanks for being here today. I hope you found this helpful. Let me know in the comments what else I can make videos on. You guys have all requested a curves video, so that is coming up at some point. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.